In the sport of baseball, when you reach second or third base, you are considered a runner in scoring position. Get a hit, and the runners on base are likely to score. In 2012, no one was more effective at getting hits with runners in scoring position than St. Louis Cardinal Alan Craig. So much so that Cardinals sports writer Bernie Miklasz nicknamed him the Clutch Master. There were 202 players that year with at least 100 at-bats with runners in scoring position, and Craig's batting average topped the list, sitting at a nice clean 400. Now, sabermetricians might look at this and say that batting average is an overrated stat that isn't a good indicator of a player's true hitting ability. That's fair, but Craig's advanced stats with runners in scoring position were great too. OPS, WRC+, WOBA, RBIs per at-bat, pick your poison. When Alan Craig was batting with runners in scoring position that season, he was going to drive them in. And while many say that being clutch is not a repeatable skill, Craig seemed to have a knack for racking up timely hits. In the year before Craig's monster 2012 season, Craig slashed .316, .388, and .667 with runners in scoring position, resulting in a 1.055 OPS and a 185 WRC+. Not quite at the same level as 2012, but he made up for it by delivering some of the most pivotal clutch hits during the Cardinals' 2011 World Series run. After delivering a pinch-hit 2 RBI single in the series-clinching Game 6 of the NLCS, Craig was called on to pinch-hit again in Game 1 of the World Series against Rangers pitcher Alexi Ogando. Ogando had been dominant in the postseason, giving up only 1 run in over 10 innings pitched up until that point. But Craig was up for the challenge. The first 3 pitches went fastball, fastball, fastball. Ogando had Craig on the ropes, and down to his last strike, Craig probably knew what was coming. Fastball. Except this time, he poked Ogando's fastball into right field, singling in the go-ahead run that ultimately won them the game. The very next day, Craig was called on to pinch hit against Alexi Ogando again, and Ogando picked up right where he left off, starting the at-bat with another fastball. And that's all Craig needed to see, because in the next pitch, fastball, single into right field, and the go-ahead run scores. And it didn't stop there. He hit a home run in the next game to break a scoreless tie. Then in the bottom of the 8th inning in Game 6, he homered again to bring the Cardinals within 2. Without Craig's home run, David Freese's game-tying triple in the bottom of the 9th wouldn't have been possible. And for good measure, Craig tacked on another go-ahead home run in Game 7. This series is best remembered for David Freese's clutch hitting heroics, but Alan Craig's hitting wasn't too far behind. And that exceptional timely hitting in the 2011 World Series clearly carried on into the 2012 season. But flukes can happen. It's entirely possible for subpar hitters to hit well in high-leverage situations, not because they are necessarily built different, but because of the natural variance that exists in baseball. It's the reason why Matt Downs could OPS over 1100 with runners in scoring position in 2011, but never eclipse 750 in any other season. These flukes happen, but flukes, by definition, are the exception rather than the norm. Of the players that led the league in batting average with runners in scoring position, the vast majority are pretty great players. And that applies to the top 10 list of all time too. 5 of the 10 on that list are already Hall of Famers. Ichiro is going to be inducted next year. Manny Ramirez would have been in if not for eating an illegally balanced diet of steroids, and you've got a 3-time Silver Slugger in Freddie Freeman and a 2-times batting champion in Arise. Alan Craig's 400 average in 2012 wasn't quite enough to crack the top 10 of all time, but his 2013 season was. Alan Craig had 130 at-bats with runners in scoring position in 2013, and he raked, accumulating 59 hits in those 130 at-bats. That resulted in a .454 average. Craig's approach was simple: hit a lot of line drives and try not to strike out, a strategy that resulted in him creating more than twice as many runs as an average player. By the end of the season, Craig had a .500 on-base percentage and a .638 slugging, good for a 1.138 OPS. There were 14 other players that OPS'd at least .950 with runners in scoring position that year. One of the common trends among these 15 players is a fairly high walk percentage. Most were well above the major league average that year. And these inflated walk percentages make sense. When runners are in scoring position, players that hit well are often walked, either intentionally or unintentionally. The reasoning is that a walk with runners in scoring position is a better outcome than giving up a hit, as showcased here, when Miguel Cabrera stepped up with a runner on second base in the top of the 10th inning. He was supposed to be intentionally walked so that the defense could have a force out at third base and so that pitcher Todd Williams wouldn't have to face Cabrera's potent bat. They preferred their chances against the next guy up. But as they were giving Cabrera his free base, Todd Williams didn't get the ball far enough away from the plate, and Cabrera singled into center to drive in the go-ahead run. Had they successfully walked Cabrera, they might have won the game. And Miguel Cabrera happened to be one of the 4 players who OPS'd higher than Craig that year with runners in scoring position. While those 4 players above Craig all had walk percentages above 14%, Craig's was 8.6, 6% lower than any other players in the top 10. Some may say his low walk percentage has to do with poor plate discipline and swinging at bad pitches, but Craig's strikeout percentage was significantly lower than all of these guys too. So what gives? To answer this question, we need to look at the bigger picture. When a batter establishes a consistent track record of elite hitting, they are treated differently. They have earned the respect of other pitchers, and pitchers get scared to pitch to them. It's why Barry Bonds has gotten walked with the bases loaded. Sometimes you'd rather take your chances facing someone lower down in the batting lineup. But what happens when the person lower down in the batting lineup is just as good of a hitter? Well, then you'd likely be less inclined to walk any batters because you're going to be facing a tough batter regardless. And that's exactly what happened to Allen Craig. Of those top 15 OPS marks with runners in scoring position in 2013, 5 of them belonged to St. Louis Cardinals. In fact, the most frequent batting order for the Cardinals that year went Matt Carpenter, Carlos Beltran, Matt Holliday, Allen Craig, and Yadier Molina. Those 5 Cardinals also make up 5 of the lowest 8 walk percentages of the group. When facing this core, pitchers had no choice but to pitch to them. It just didn't make sense to walk Craig when Yadier Molina was waiting on deck with a solid track record with runners in scoring position himself. This core 5 led St. Louis to post a team slash line with runners in scoring position of 330, 402, 463, which led the league in each of the 3 categories, and Allen Craig was the one leading the charge. Through September 4th, Craig's 97 RBIs ranked 3rd in the National League, but he did run into a bit of a hiccup on that September 4th matchup against the Reds. In the top of the 4th inning, Craig lined a ball to Joey Votto at first base, and while he was rounding first base, Craig appeared to roll his ankle and immediately crumpled to the ground. He suffered a Lisfranc foot injury. It sidelined him from playing for the remainder of the regular season. Luckily for Craig, the Cardinals made another deep playoff run, and he was able to come back for the World Series against the Boston Red Sox. In Game 3 of that year's World Series, Craig was the hero once again, as he scored the game-winning run on an obstruction call when third baseman Will Middlebrooks tripped him as he was making his way to home plate. And even though the Cardinals would eventually go on to lose that series against the Red Sox in 6 games, Craig had a solid World Series, leading the Cardinals in batting average and on-base percentage. It marked the end of a 3-year run from 2011 to 2013, where Craig established himself as one of baseball's best at driving in runners in scoring position. He was creating runs at a rate that was simply unmatched. Unfortunately, that 2013 season was the last time we would ever see the clutch master. In 2014, Craig was a shell of his former self. Mid-season through July 30th, Craig's batting splits were bad, both with runners in scoring position and without. The next week, he was shipped over to the very Red Sox team that beat them in last year's World Series, in a deal that sent John Lackey to the Cardinals. And while Lackey continued to be a solid starting pitcher with the Cardinals, Craig did the opposite. At the time of the trade, Craig was slashing .237, .291, .346. After the trade, those numbers dropped, and continued to drop further and further, until by the end of the season, his slash line was an abysmal .215, .279, .315. In his time with the Red Sox that year, Craig's OPS plus of 21 was lower than any other season in his career. But it's hard to judge players immediately after they get traded. Sometimes it'll take some time to adjust. Well, 2015 came and went, and Craig's OPS plus was once again 21. After 2013, Craig, simply put, couldn't hit. Most attribute Craig's sharp decline to his foot injury, claiming that it compromised his swing and timing. Chris O'Leary put together a pretty good analysis of the situation, stating that Craig's wide stance and leg kick required a strong and flexible lower body, and age, injury, along with widening his already wide stance even more after 2013, was what led to the decrease in effectiveness. Whatever the reason, his numbers never recovered to what they were in that period between 2011 and 2013. His days as the clutch master were over, and he bounced around the minor leagues for a little while before calling it quits in 2019. By the time he retired, his time in St. Louis was a distant memory, overshadowed by the heroics of David Freese, and his rapid decline made it easy for people to forget just how elite he was in his prime. That .454 average with runners in scoring position in 2013 ranks third on the all-time list, and the rest of the players on that list have racked up way more hits in their careers than Craig. But Craig shouldn't be remembered for his historic decline. It wasn't long, but for a 3-year stretch, Craig made a strong case to be known as baseball's most clutch hitter. And while he isn't a household name anymore, Craig's legacy should not be forgotten. He was instrumental to the Cardinals' 2011 World Series championship, and he followed that up with 2 of the best hitting seasons with runners in scoring position that the game has ever seen. The percentage of people watching that are subscribed actually went up since the last video, but to the 94.3% of people that aren't, if you enjoy the content and want to support the channel, feel free to subscribe. And if there are any video topics or ideas that you'd want to see, leave a comment, and it might just get featured in the next video. Until next time.